welcome to the cafe. I'm Corey. I've been thinking a lot about watercolor lately and playing around with my watercolors. It's one of my favorite art mediums, and so I want to do this little series called Watercolor Warm-Ups. So today we're going to be playing around with watercolor brushes, and I also want to play around with watercolor pans and tube watercolor. I love all things watercolor, but I thought we would go ahead and do a little card of these sweet little flowers. I was playing around quite a long time ago and came up with these, and they are really, it's a therapeutic, quick little art form that you can do real easily, and it's so versatile. I've even drawn these. I've painted and drawn these because they're watercolor brushes, right? While riding in the car with my friend. So he does a lot of the driving, and I was easily able to paint these while riding in the car. And of course, you know how I love to paint in bed. That's something I like to talk about here on the channel. So I'm just going to use this. This is a 4.5 by 12 inch cutoff of watercolor paper, and this brand is Canson. That's what I usually use, and I've been using Artist Loft as well. Canson you can pretty much get anywhere, and then Artist Loft is more of a brand for Michaels. Now here's my set of watercolor brush pens, and these are really cool. I love these. You're going to be seeing quite a bit of these with this watercolor warm-up series, and they do not state I'm pretty sure, let me make absolute sure, they do not tell you the colors. So you just got to pick the colors you're attracted to, but there's a really nice selection of colors with these pens. And then another product I really love with the watercolor is the Stabilo set. Now these are not watercolor pens, but they're fine liners, and you get a really wide array of colors with these too, and they are water activated. So if you do any spraying or spattering after, I like to use those for the stem work. Now these I just used the brush pens, but then I did a little bit more detailed work with this one here. And I use the Stabilos, but you've got to be careful because they will run and smear if you add water after. So you've just got to be a little strategic with it. Now here's another one of my favorite art supplies, and I've just got a couple of brush pens today. I've got a larger and a smaller round on the watercolor brush pens. Excuse the light, it's really stormy today, so it's pretty dark here. And then the Stabilos, I've pulled dark green, brown, and black, and I just like to have these three colors handy. I don't always use them. I may not use them all today, but I like to have them handy. So I figured we'd play around with these colors today. I've got brown, green, pale light blue, and a turquoise color. So let's just go ahead and get into this, and I'm going to go ahead and play some music because this is really you're going to see just how to do these, and it's very self-explanatory. So let's go ahead and get started. Once you get all your flowers scribbled out, then it's time to grab your water brush, and I'm just going to use the smaller bristled round today. Go ahead and use whichever one you're comfortable with. They all, you can just get a little bit more detail the smaller the brush, of course. So we'll start with this, and it just takes a little bit of practice to figure out how much water to put in, but I like to start with the smallest amount of water possible. What I like to do with these petals is do one, and then you've got to kind of skip around away from what you've done. So I didn't add any color or any water at all to this little petal. I'm just pulling it out with the dampness that's already on the brush. So we'll go ahead and stick with this brush now, and then you can just come in periodically and throw a couple drops and put it on your paper, on your towel or your paper towel, whatever you've got handy, and then move on. And just skip around your page until everything's complete. So now this little bud and this petal are completely dry. I'm going to come in and add a little bit more color to these to get them to go a little bit more with what else is happening. So you can do that if you end up with a little bit of trouble from your water. If you get too much water, just let stuff dry, and you can come back in and you can highlight your other petals as well with that. We'll just go ahead and use this turquoise. I don't remember if I used the blue or the turquoise. And I'm on these, they're pretty little. I'm just going to go ahead and wet the bristles and not use a drop. Now this is completely dry, and look at how lovely those are. There's just such a subtle difference between the turquoise and the pale blue, and it all just comes together so beautifully. So if you want to do different colored flowers, which I'm going to make quite a few videos on doing that, if you just have one or two colors that are through everything, it will just pull together so beautifully for you. So now with the Stabilo pens, I've got my brown one here, and this little piece here I did with a black pen, and I really like how this came out. I just did some stems. I didn't do any detail work on the flowers themselves, but I added some little dots and these fun little botanicals, so you can really spruce up your little image quite a bit with other botanicals. Now this one I did a lot of really fine line work on the little petals, so the options are really so open for you to be able to do all different kinds of stuff here. And what I want to do is just come in, and I'm real quick with this. I don't give myself much time to think. So this had a little bit of a watercolor mess right there, and I was able to easily just fix that by pulling that stem around the base of that petal, that bud. And then I like to just work on one at a time, follow this down. And sometimes I don't always take it to the bottom of the page, but I like to do one continuous line on the stems, and then on the bigger petals, of course, you can come in and do bigger stems for them. But I still like to just start out doing the one. We'll ground that one, and then you can come in and do leaves and whatever you wish. This is a really fun little warm-up to play around with. It gets your hands warmed up, it gets your creative juices flowing. Such a nice little rainy afternoon technique. I forgot to do my stem over here. And then you can always come in and clean things up. I like to come out to a point with those, with the pen, get that little point. Throw in some dots on this one here. We'll just do it to all of them. Now the other warm-ups after this are going to be, this one's a little bit more instructional, but I really want to also do some where I just paint and play music and have the video be shorter so that we can all get on with our lives and our days. I wanted to show you one more thing with this. So now that everything's dry, I can still come in here and add some more color to these if I want to have a little bit more of a defined look. So we'll just do a little bit here. And when you're doing this part, you really don't, you want to just make sure your brush is just the slightest bit damp. But you can, it's really nice to be able to come back in and add a little bit more definition and darken the color a bit if you want to. Now this one's going to be tricky. I'm going to leave it alone because it's going to activate the Stabilo pen. So I'm just going to grab my, let me grab my towel, and I'm going to go ahead and get these bristles pretty wet here. Damp. Takes a little practice with this, but you'll pick it right up. I love watercolor brushes. They're one of my absolute favorite art supplies. And like I said before, I really like to paint in bed. And if I can get away with painting while riding in the car, I will do it. Luckily, you can do it with these. So now when I'm painting this wet on dry, it's not giving me the blend, but I really like this look. It gives you a little bit sharper of a line, but it's still so lovely, and it gives you that definition. Here, let me pull you in close for this one. I'm gonna go ahead and get my bristles on my brush wet. Should say damp. I really don't mean wet. I don't want wet. I just want to blend that color out without losing it. And if the brush is too wet, you will lose the color. And like I said, you'll just get a feel for it. I really enjoy this kind of medium and this kind of technique because there's so much experimentation you can do and so much discovery. Look at that. Now, this little sharp line I'm not thrilled with, so I can just come in and very gently pull those out a little bit more. Watercolor can be a very forgiving art medium, and there's a lot of fear around watercolor, and I understand that, but don't let it stop you. So sometimes there's fear around it. It's like, oh, I don't want to mess up my picture. But I like to approach artwork with the willingness to mess up the whole thing if need be. And you know, I've thrown pieces out because they haven't worked out the way I've wanted them to, but it's been so valuable to me because I learned so much from it. So now I'm going back to my brown pen, and I just want to do a little bit of detail work. So I'm going to add a little bit more to this one here. Give this one some dots, and as you can see, you can get some different angles, and you can get wonky, cute, interesting little flowers like this. You can do all different kinds of stuff and make your artwork really interesting without having everything be, you know, just one full-on flower for each one. I'll keep you close in for this one here, and let's just go ahead and add a little tiny bit of line work. I think it's important. Some people have a tendency to start out here and work to the center. It's much better, more effective to work from the center out, because then you can flick that pen and get that really tight little point coming out. It's just one of those little things. I've had students come from the other direction, and it makes your lines a little bit bigger, and it's just better to give them this little opportunity to come out. But the difference you can get, the detail that you can accomplish with just the smallest amount of pen work is pretty phenomenal, I think. And it's real easy to get carried away with this part, so less is more. I like to kind of push myself to move quickly and not overthink it. Just get in there and put in some lines. Let's go ahead and do a few on this little blossom here. Of course, you could really drag them out. Let's do some long ones on this one and short. The variation of length helps too. I just think you know, the messier, the opportunities I have to get a little bit messy and not have to be really tight and concise, I like that kind of artwork so much better. So here's this little beauty. And I'm going to stop this one here just for the sake of keeping the video a decent length. So in the future, for some of these watercolor warm-ups, I want to play around and just play music and draw a lot of different kinds of botanicals. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification and stay tuned and grab your watercolor supplies, and we will explore and have a lot of fun with botanicals and watercolors. I'll see you real soon. Have a great day.